Hey, greetings to you Cub fans. This is Mart with Max Q, and I'm here with another update on the J-3 Cub Restoration project. Here is your date, which again, this is a Wednesday now. At least I think it's a Wednesday. And now the videos are coming out on Wednesday, they tell me. And since I'm the one that makes the rules, I guess I'm telling myself. So anyway, if you watched the last video, you know that where on the left side of the cockpit, where the fuel shutoff valve is, and it's in a little well, and there's a cable there. And then over on the right side, further forward, where the carb heat is, there were some little, I call them bulkheads. It's these guys here that were, as it turns out, they were brazed in place, but they weren't supposed to be there, and I didn't know that. In fact, it's really kind of interesting because this is the one from the fuel shutoff side. And the hole also was not in the standard place. So like a couple months ago, I wound up, it was a bit tedious figuring out how I was going to do it, and especially to make sure I didn't do any damage to anything. This was before the fabric went in on the cockpit, but still, I didn't want to damage anything. And I got this hole that I dremeled out, basically. Well, I drilled a hole and then I dremeled it the size, cleaned it up and such. But then I finally realized these bulkheady things weren't supposed to be there. And the reason they'd be a problem, in fact, I've got one of the wells right here. So what happens is the cable that would operate, like this is the fuel shutoff. So the cable goes this way, and there's a nut that you put right on here, and that's what holds the cable to this assembly, and then all of that is eventually fed into the fuselage, and the screws that hold this on are what keep everything in place. And somebody had put these bulkheads in, which, you know, on one hand seemed like a really good idea because they make it really robust. And I'm guessing, I could be wrong, but at some point in time somebody probably had a fuel shutoff valve that didn't work very well, and they were having a hard time not messing up the mounting of the well to the cockpit or to the fuselage. And they thought, well, if there was just something there to make that more robust. But as I see it, the problem with that is that to do that, you have to put the cable through here, and then the nut goes on this side, and that means everything has to be in place when you're finishing up the fabric work inside the cockpit and the painting and such. And you really don't want to paint the cockpit with this in place because it's got to be a different color and it's going to be in the way and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I got these, as it turns out. I got them out not too terribly bad. I had a really nice little small hacksaw kit that my wife got me several years ago, and I'd never really used it. And so I thought, hey, this might be just the time. And when I opened it up, not only did it have multiple blades in there, and there was only the blades are only about so long, and so it was nice compact size but really well built. And it had essentially like a cable with an abrasive on it, and I thought, hey, that might be just the trick, because I didn't really want to have hacksaw teeth that could potentially damage the fabric and such. So as it turned out, it worked out really well. I sawed through a fair amount and then was able to start to wiggle and then snapped them out. Then I took the Dremel and I dressed up the remainder of the brazing that was still in there. Then I had to do, and I'll show this in a minute, I had to do a little, I had to pull the fabric back around and re-glue it, and then I put a tape over it, but we'll see that here in a minute. So anyway, it's nice to understand that, and it's something here coming up in a second that I'll explain also. It's just really interesting how until you know, you just simply don't know. And there is something that can help in theory. So like here, I printed this out quite a while back. So this is the Cub parts list, and it's an old Piper batch of documents that call out essentially all the parts. And then they have tables that identify the parts and such, and it works pretty good. But for example, this drawing here is even the online versions. I finally did find an online version that has good enough resolution that you can read the numbers, all the numbers inside the circles, so you can look them up on the chart here to see what the item is. Several of the copies that you'll find online or when you print them like this, you can't really read all those details. So as I was working on the elevator bell crank, which again, we'll look at that here in a minute. And if you remember there, or if you already know, there's that ball that is so that the torque tube can operate the ailerons while being connected to the elevator horn. And it gives it the room, the ball gives it room for that arc of the stick to take place. And so I was seeing in the drawing here that it's talking about a couple of spacers. And I'm thinking, again, because I didn't take this airplane apart. Now the wings, they were still covered, and so everything was there under the fabric. But the fuselage had been worked on in the past, and there was no fabric on it, and it was just boxes of parts. And it's worked out fine, except that every once in a while, I run into a situation where I don't know what is supposed to go where, and the information in here isn't always as helpful as it could be. So anyway, here's the tube that connects to that ball. And then we'll look at that again here in a minute. But these are the two little spacers. And they were not with all these components with this airplane. They were in a Ziploc bag. And it took me a while, but yesterday, I think it was, I finally found them. And it actually helped because, and it took me a while to even remember this because I was getting a little exasperated, but here they are also because I have that clipped wing Cub project of my own that I've not been able to work on for several years. I haven't had the time and money. And, or I guess you could say I haven't made the time. I definitely haven't had the money. But anyway, so I thought, hey, I need to see if I can find this component or the bell crank and from that airplane. And so sure enough, looking in the basement, I found that, and that's when I was finally able to see what these little spacers exactly are. Once I knew exactly what they look like, and they do not look like this in that drawing in the parts manual. They look like long, I mean not super long, but they look 3 times longer than these. And instead they're very short, and they go on either side of the ball, and they go between these tabs, and of course the bolt holds it all together. So once I knew what they looked like, then I could go through the miscellaneous bags of stuff that I had still here with the airplane and find them, and I did. It didn't actually take all that long once I knew what I was looking for. So anyway, there's just always a lot of challenges. And the interesting thing is I'm going to learn so much doing this particular J3 because, again, I did a Super Cub, but there's a ton of difference between a Super Cub and a J3. And I'm pretty well versed now on Super Cub, and I'm getting versed on the J3. But if you don't know, you know, it's... and, you know, you have some resources, but you don't always have somebody that you can call that has the right answer. Online in the J3 Cub forum, there's a lot of help there, but there's some of it's not helpful and confusing, but a lot of it is helpful, and I'm very thankful that I've been able to use that as a resource as well. But anyway, it's definitely a challenge, and it's kind of nice though that once I get through this, and I'm certainly not going to know everything, and I will forget some things, but I am going to understand so much more about the details of a J3 Cub after I get done with this project. So that's pretty cool. So let's take a look at a few other things here. This video is not going to be super long, but I have been working on this another interesting challenge. So I'm making the elevator cables here, and these aren't in super bad shape, but the cable isn't terribly expensive, and especially like for the rudder cables, they're going to show in the cockpit. So I wanted them to look fresh and clean for this project, and so I decided I'd go ahead and make new elevator cables, and it's a good thing I did because, as it turns out, so if we look down here, I've made marks based on the information that you can find on the internet. There are 2 different lengths. The two cables for the elevator system are not the same length. So one should be this length on this line here, and that, for reference, goes to the inside of the thimble. Well, basically the inside edge of the thimble here, and then the other cable is supposed to come to here. But it's interesting to note that both of these cables are exactly the same length. They're the short cables, and that is not the way it's supposed to be. Now, I can't guarantee that this airplane actually had these two cables installed in that fuselage. However, I do think they were, though, because they were bagged up and marked, and so most likely they were. But here's the other thing I did was with the turnbuckles on, which the reason why there's an extra eye here is on the elevator cables, I am transitioning to the MS ends that have the slots in them so that you can use the clips on these turnbuckles instead of having to safety wire them. That's one thing I have done before on a J-3, and it's very similar on the Super Cub. And the turnbuckles back there at the elevator connection point are, it's a very tight space. And so my thought was using the clips will make the safetying process of that much easier. And if you don't know, some turnbuckle barrels, they have slots on like the 12 and 6 position here, and then the fork or the eye, this is a cable eye here, they have a slot as well, and you line the slots up once you get the turnbuckle at the tension that you want, and then there's a little clip that goes in there, and they just kind of pop right in. They're much easier than dealing with the safety wire. So especially on this one for the elevator, I thought that would make this process a whole lot easier. So anyway, I've got the turnbuckles here, and but here we are with these two cables the same length. So one of them needs to be this length. Oh, I didn't explain. So here's the deal. If you run one of these turnbuckles all the way down and you have the other one run out, you can get the 1.125" or so difference between the two of these lengths. But you don't really have the turnbuckles like they should be. You've got one compressed in really, really short, which is not a problem, but you've got another one run way out, and you might be running close to running out of threads on that. So I'm going to be making the new cables the length they should be, and then everything will be as it should. So it's just, but you don't just spend 10 minutes and figure all this out. There's a long process of figuring out what's going on, and then realizing these aren't the same size, and that they shouldn't be, that they are the same size and they shouldn't be. So but I've got that all figured out now. So soon I'll have those elevator cables done, because I'd like to have the rudder cables and the elevator cables all in place before I put the fabric on the sides. So with that in mind, here are the rudder cables in place with the fair leads in, and I've got them rubber banded up here to the trim pulley, which again, I've got this nice hole back here where this is going to have an aluminum cover over this whole aft section here, so you'll have great access for reaching up inside if you need to do anything with the trim yoke and jack screw, or for things like just freeing up those cables and being able to feed them through the holes that'll be somewhere here in the fabric to get outside and come to the rudder itself. So, and then down here inside, this is more of then those details with the ball. So I have the elevator bell crank is mounted with new hardware, and so one of the cables attaches to these two flat pieces of steel here, and the other one attaches then to well, actually it attaches to this area back here, but of course it'd be on the back side, and then the stick that where those spacers go is on either side of the ball here, and that's where, again, that allows the torque tube that sits on these two big bearing surfaces here to be able to move left and right so that you have your aileron control while not upsetting anything here in the elevator control. And again, this will be more like in that position or something similar to that once everything is hooked up. But at least now I've got all the components for that. I understand what's going on, and trying to get various of these things, especially that are aft, like from this point aft, taken care of, so that I don't have to reach through to feed anything through after the fabric is on. I will most likely be putting some inspection hole covers on either side here, I think, or at least one, so that you can reach these fair leads that are for the elevator cables for possible maintenance in the future. But for now, I'll be able to actually do all that before the fabric goes on. So so now, oh yeah, let me show you over here that the so now that I have those bulkheads off, which they were causing me a lot of trouble in getting these wells to fit. So now, oh look at that, the well just fits in there absolutely fantastic, like it should. So solved that whole problem there too, that I didn't understand why I was having trouble with there being enough clearance. It's because those bulkheads sat slightly aft and they were crowding the space, and there wasn't really enough room, and it created a lot of headaches. And again, because I didn't know, I wound up, you know, spinning my wheels there for a while. And anyway, but you live and learn. Also, I went ahead and put some friction tape. I did this a little different than what is normally done. I like to see the stringers just dive in and disappear as they come back to a terminating point. So they'll trying to kind of see, it looks like right about here is where the last that you'll see of the stringer shape, and then it'll just be a straight line of fabric from longeron to longeron. And I had these notched around the tubes, the wood, but with a bump or something they could be moved, and you really wouldn't want that to happen. So I've captured them with the friction tape and some shellac on there. So that's a process that Piper used a lot back in the day, and it really does work quite well. The friction tape is just flexible enough that you can get it to conform to a lot of good shape. And then when you put the shellac on it, it basically just seals the deal. It's not going to unravel, and it'll last for decades. So anyway, nice simple process there. Again, the fabric on the bottom is still just shrunk to the 250 degrees. I'll get the sides on, and then we'll be tightening up the rest. And then the last thing I was going to show here is that underneath the blanket here, I have the fabric. You can't really see it, but there's an outline here. That's one side of the fuselage folded up, and then this hump here is the other side of the fuselage. I've just got them under the blanket so they're not getting dusty for today. But tomorrow, I'm hoping to tap into one of those and start putting it on the left side of the fuselage here. And so anyway, as it has been, running behind, but solving a lot of these nagging, frustrating issues. And once I get those done, I think the pace is gonna pick up as far as the overall amount of time that it takes to get things done. However, I am transitioning to some additional other work, aircraft work, so it's gonna still drag out a little bit, but the goal is to have all of this finished by spring, and then the airplane can be put together in the late spring, early summer. And I know Andy's hoping to take it to Oshkosh next year, so that'll be awesome. Be great to see the airplane up there. So anyway, so there's the status of things at this point in time, and we're moving forward. So thanks for watching, and next week we'll have another update. Take care.